Dalvin Cook heading to the New York Jets. What does that mean for Breece Hall? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. Follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. Kate, it's Friday. We've got training camp reports and tweets galore. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's been an absolute flurry of training camp news. It has just been like rapid fire. I've got all of my Twitter alerts set up to get some, all of the instant coverage just sent directly to my phone. And I've had to silence my phone, Marcus, because it's just been nonstop because there's been a lot of NFL news, whether it be injury, whether it be Dalvin Cook heading on a flight to go visit the New York Jets this weekend. There's a lot in the cards, and we finally have real news to talk about, and I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, my wife has not been very happy. We're having a nice dinner, and I'm updating her about Richie James practice reports out of Kansas City, and she's just like, "Get a life." But we don't have a life. Yeah, we don't have a life. We cover fantasy football to help you guys win your championships. Okay, we've got some news coming out of the NFL. Dalvin Cook, who was recently released by the Minnesota Vikings, is taking his, I believe this is his second visit. New England was first with the New York Jets, and it sounds like a deal is pretty likely here. So what are just your overall thoughts on Dalvin Cook to the Jets, what this means for Breece Hall and the rest of that offense?
It's interesting. I'll tell you that. I can't probably think of a worse landing spot for Dalvin Cook, either for his value or, the value of Breece Hall or anybody else in that backfield. It's going to be kind of a mess. Jets fans should be absolutely ecstatic. Obviously, even if Breece Hall is on the perfect trajectory here, you're going to want to make sure you're protecting that early round draft pick and make sure that you're not setting him up for failure, as he ramps back up into football shape. But from a fantasy perspective, this is nothing but bad news. And I have a feeling that Dalvin Cook in this backfield, we're just going to be set for a bunch of weeks where we don't know who to start in 2023.
I saw a tweet from one of the reporters with the Jets. It's basically the idea of bringing Dalvin Cook in, it would be to give him a lot of work in the first month and a half of the season, basically start him, run him crazy. And then when you get to late October and into November, that's when it kind of goes back to Breece Hall being the workhorse back. I think they want to keep Breece Hall healthy for the final 2-3 months of the year. But from a dynasty perspective, we are in the peak of Breece Hall's value. He's probably never going to get more valuable than he is right now.
Yeah.
And for him to basically be giving up a starting job because of this injury it's not great. It's not great.
No, and even if, obviously this is dynasty, we have to have a long-term perspective, but Marcus, you mentioned it, Breece Hall's value, it's really hard to see that even ever surpassing where he is now. Right now, RB4 on Dynasty League football. Yeah. And I mean, he's 22 years old. He is a well-rounded running back. He is so talented, but you
want your RB4 to start. That's kind of a big deal, right?
And you don't want competition for carries. That's part of what, makes, Jonathan Taylor, though there's some stuff up there, Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, those are the top end running backs. And why? Because they are the top dogs in their respective offenses. If Breece Hall has to compete for touches on a game to game basis, if they go with the hot hand, even down the stretch, I'd rather Breece Hall not be competing with Dalvin Cook.
And there's a chance that like Dalvin Cook is just a 1-year deal and they move on from him after this year, and it's not a big deal. My fear would be though that this works, right? Like Dalvin Cook gets 16 touches a game, Breece Hall's 14 touches a game, and the Jets kind of just look at this as a committee going forward, like, hey, Breece Hall is our most important player. I don't think it's all that different like than what Dallas has done the last couple of years, where Tony Pollard's our most valuable running back, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to give them the most touches in a game either. We want to make sure that when we're using that player, it's in high leverage situations where we can get the most bang for our buck. I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets feel like we think Breece Hall, we want to keep him around that 15 to 17 touch range. Let's make sure we get somebody else in here that can give us high quality carries when Hall's not on the field.
Yeah, I mean, you have Dalvin Cook averaging almost 18 rush attempts per game over his career. Like very, very active. And like the thing is, you're not necessarily, also getting a back that can't catch, averaging 3 receptions per game throughout the course of his career. Like,
yep.
He's got speed. He's got a little bit of everything. And, even if he's not in his prime, obviously like he's had over 1,500 regular season scrimmage touches in his career. And you look at that and you think, okay, like there's, bound to be some decline. It has seen a decrease in his overall rushing efficiency over the last 3 years, but he's still better than, like a Michael Carter. He's better than,
which Michael Carter's still going to get work in this offense. It's not going to be a lot, but I could see like 4 touches a game for Carter because he's a good player in his own right.
So say you were in a dynasty startup right now, like right this very minute, assuming Dalvin Cook does sign with the New York Jets, what is the earliest spot where you'd feel comfortable taking Breece Hall right now? I'm guessing it is not RB4.
No, I'm thinking like anytime you get to like RB7, RB8, but even then, like I'm probably just going to pick a different position, right? And this has kind of been our theme all summer is like every running back is a sell. I would rather in the early rounds take Garrett Wilson, take some of those other players just higher than Breece Hall, and I'll figure out my running backs later. There's just so much uncertainty now between the offensive line is a question mark. What does this offense look like under Aaron Rodgers? How healthy is Breece Hall? What's Dalvin Cook's role going to be if he signs? How much are they going to use Michael Carter? Like, there's just way too many question marks for me to draft this player inside the top, 2 rounds of my startup drafts.
Yeah, it's a lot to digest. I
don't want any part of this.
I don't want any part of it either. And I don't even want Dalvin Cook to this point. Like I thought if you landed with the Dolphins, there might be a little bit of value there because I think he'd be such a clear tier break. Yep. He'd be the guy. But there's not so much a tier break here. It's no bueno for anybody involved.
I think these guys both end up being like RB2s this year. And as for Breece Hall's dynasty value, again, if Dalvin Cook signs, I think this really tanks it because you are in year 2 of a 4-year rookie contract. We know how the running back market is going. 4 years is probably the most likely outcome here with him and the Jets. Maybe they get a franchise tag. I want my top 5 running back to be a guy that I can expect to get, frankly, 20 touches a game. And I just don't see that happening for Breece Hall, at least this year, and maybe next year, a full year removed from the injury. They take the restrictions off, but I won't be surprised if this is just kind of the model going forward with Breece Hall.
Yeah, not
great.
Not good. Bummer. Wipe my tears.
Let's talk about something that's a little bit more exciting, and that's Darren Waller absolutely dominating Giants camp. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us in this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. This week, it's Trevor Lawrence. when the top tier of quarterbacks are off the board in fantasy football drafts in 2023, there's another line of luxury passers and runners who are guaranteed to fit in your starting lineups every week, driving a sleeker Jaguars offense that now features wide receiver Calvin Ridley. Trevor Lawrence has top 5 scoring upside as a QB1. Expect Lawrence to keep living up to his immense arm and athletic talent and cruise to production that builds off his hot finish to last season. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championships, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. The same is true for your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it, and they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com, and let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Everydayers, Kate and I will be back on Monday to continue wrapping up some of the biggest news coming out of training camp. And oh, by the way, we get actual football next week. Next Thursday is the Hall of Fame game, which I'm sure we'll get some reactions from. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But Kate, I want to talk to you about Darren Waller, who has been reportedly absolutely dominating Giants camp. I even saw a tweet today that Brian Daboll pulled Darren Waller off the practice field to force Daniel Jones to throw the ball to somebody else. Are you buying or selling this kind of resurgence from Darren Waller?
No, I'm absolutely buying. I like, when healthy, like, there's no question that Darren Waller is the guy. And I think what we saw from the Giants this offseason was a very savvy move and a very interesting way to go about signing their quote unquote wide receiver one. Like,
Okay.
in a season where, I mean, the wide receiver market was just absolutely terrible, they went an alternate route. They traded a 3rd round pick for Darren Waller, and it was a freaking cheat code. Like, not only can he function as your team's leading receiver pretty easily, you're saving money because he's being paid as a tight end, not as a wide receiver. I mean, all things considered, the reports on Twitter are absolutely insane. Just with his ability to get open in the open field, and another year in Brian Daboll's offense, another year of Daniel Jones development, which we saw him trend pretty positively last year. It feels like there's really something here.
I agree. And I just think he makes more sense with Daniel Jones anyways. I don't really view Daniel Jones as like somebody who thrives at throwing the ball down the sideline 30, 40 yards down the field. But I do see him somebody who can get the ball over the middle of the field kind of accurately and quickly. And that's Darren Waller. And I think we forgot, because he's been so banged up the last couple of years, like what type of talent Darren Waller is. Like, he had back-to-back 1,100-yard seasons for the Raiders. I think with Brian Daboll finding creative ways to kind of get him in space, yeah, it would not shock me, Kate, it would not shock me at all if he finishes as like the tight end 2 this year, because we've seen it before. Like, this has happened before. Like, could he get 90 catches and 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns this year without really thinking twice about it? Absolutely. So I'm 100% buying this.
Yeah, I'm kind of all in, and like, the writing was on the wall, right? Like, I think the moves that this team has made really kind of complement the idea that you mentioned, like the ability of Daniel Jones to work the middle of the field. Probably why they signed like 75 slot wide receivers this year, like, because that it kind of complements what we've seen Daniel Jones be successful with. And I think Darren Waller, like, when he's healthy, his ability to create mismatches across the middle of the field with his size and athleticism, kind of unmatched. And I would not at all be surprised to see him bounce back. Now, let's talk about his dynasty value, because he is like, I think part of the concern here is that he's aging, of course.
Yes.
He is just about to turn 31 years old. But right now being drafted on average tight end 8 in Dynasty League football. And for a team that's in win now mode, Darren Waller could be a monstrous value.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing with Waller is I don't think I would rank him or draft him ahead of any of the players that are going ahead of him, which is Kelsey, Andrews, Pitts, Hawkinson, Kittle, Goddard, Kincaid.
It feels like a fair ranking.
It feels like a fair ranking, but I will say I would much rather wait on Darren Waller and draft him at pick 95, which is where he's going now, rather than spending pick 62 on George Kittle. Now, again, I would rather have Kittle than Waller, but there shouldn't be a 34, 35 spot difference between those two players in your drafts. I just want to wait, because what I think I would like to do is draft a Waller and then draft somebody else who's a little bit younger to go with him. Maybe you draft a Waller and you draft a Sam Laporta or David Njoku or something like that. I think that's a better strategy for me than going out and drafting TJ Hawkinson at 41 overall.
Now, in terms of like a tight end, so let's say we're going to go with Darren Waller, tight end 8, being drafted right around like the, 90 to 100 spots in ADP. What do you think in terms of like, if you were to pair him with a total flyer that could have an impact, maybe next year, maybe the year following, after your Darren Waller era, what tight end would you want to take in like the later rounds that you think could have a big shot outside of, let's say, the top 12, which Sam Laporta comes in as tight end 12. So no more Sam Laporta.
This one's easy for me. And actually, it's way outside the top 12. It's Trey McBride, who's 23 years old. I think one of the reasons we're not as excited about McBride is because Zach Ertz is there. But I feel like a lot of people have missed this news that Zach Ertz had major knee surgery this year. He's not a lock to play in week 1. And he kind of looked like dust last year, right? Like there's just no way that Zach Ertz is going to have as big of a role in this offense as he did last year. McBride going into his age 24 season, one of the best receivers after the catch. He was a Mackey Award winner back in 2021, and it cost you nothing. And it's important to remember that Arizona did give him a second round draft capital. So I think McBride, especially if he's playing with Colt McCoy at quarterback, this year, wouldn't be surprised if he just gets fed a ton of targets in that offense.
All right. Now, I want your last, before we move on to like our rapid fire news, as the resident Cowboys expert, I need to ask, am I crazy for thinking that Jake Ferguson could be a total late round dart throw to pair with my Darren Waller shares? Dalton Schultz departure?
Absolutely not. I love this call because Cowboys spent a second round pick on Luke Schoonemaker, who is going 24 as tight end 24. Can't stay healthy. Didn't make it through the first OTA practice without a hamstring injury. Didn't even make it through the first minicamp practice because of an injury. Now he's on the PUP dealing with plantar fasciitis. Didn't get through a single practice at the East-West Shrine game because of an injury. Somebody who has just been banged up his whole career. He's going to turn 25 as a rookie, but it's Ferguson who has taken almost every single rep as the tight end 1 in Cowboys training camp so far. And Dak Prescott loves him, which matters. So I think Ferguson is a really, really good shot, a really good, player to gamble on, and he costs you basically nothing. Tight end 32.
Okay. I'm overjoyed. So basically my takeaways here, if you're going to go in on a guy like, Darren Waller, who's a little bit older, I think could legitimately put up a top 3 season, pair him with one of these other late round tight ends, a Trey McBride, or both, because there's literally zero risk involved here. Trey McBride, Jake Ferguson. There are plenty of other names I think that could be in the mix here. Jelani Woods, who's as tall as a house, I think, per my last estimate.
Yep.
With the Colts. I think there's a lot of, up and coming names that you might be able to get as a value now who might not be ready to contribute right off the bat, but might be by the time Darren Waller's time comes to an end for his fantasy value.
Let's do some rapid fire questions from training camp over the last couple of days next. All right, Kate, wrapping up some of the biggest news from training camps over the last couple of days. New England wide receivers, a couple of things for you. Juju Smith-Schuster playing exclusively out of the slot. Tyquan Thornton has 1 target in the last 2 days of practice. Which is the bigger news for you?
Juju Smith-Schuster. It's been no secret. I like myself some Juju Smith-Schuster from time to time, but the thing about Juju is we've already seen him be incredibly productive, right? Like we've already seen a wide receiver 1 season from him in the past. Now, does the Patriots offense look a lot different? Absolutely. But Juju's still 26 years old. 26 years old. We've seen him be productive out of the slot. And by all accounts, we're hearing really good things about the relationship between him and Mac Jones. And he's been getting some nice, a decent target share so far from what I've read in training camp. I'm buying, and at wide receiver 52 in dynasty startups, like behind Cortland Sutton, Brandon Cooks, like I'll take the 26-year-old who I think has, plenty of upside, especially in like a full PPR scoring format.
I'm just bummed about Tyquan Thornton because I liked him coming out of Baylor. I liked him last year before he got hurt. He's just such a bad fit with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. Like he needs to be with a quarterback that can really throw the ball down the field, and that's just not either one of those guys. So bums me out.
But Calvin the skill set of Juju complements it perfectly.
Yes, absolutely. That's the key thing is I think Mac Jones is going to absolutely love Juju. Calvin Ridley having a strong camp for Jacksonville. Are you surprised?
No, not at all. Like the interesting thing that I feel like haven't talked about. We've talked a lot about the gambling suspension. We didn't really talk about before that. He wasn't healthy. The last time we saw him on a football field, he wasn't healthy. He was managing a foot injury, and he's been saying it. He's been hyping himself up. He's like, I wasn't healthy. I am now, and you're gonna be able to see that when I play. Yep. And I think the most interesting clip, and for any of our everydayers here that haven't seen it, go find it on Twitter. I'll try to find it and retweet it. But there was a clip of Calvin Ridley running the same route as Zay Jones. And you can just see it, like Zay Jones, he's a speedster. He's not exactly like old man Rivers and clunking along here. Like Calvin Ridley ran the route about 50 times faster and better than Zay Jones. And it was just like to see the contrast in these clips back to back just shows you how well he's moving. And the like he looks absolutely fantastic. Some really nice highlight catches, but we already saw Trevor Lawrence take a huge step forward last year, and that was with Zay Jones and Christian Kirk as his leading wide receivers. Now he's got Evan Ingram, Calvin Ridley, who I do think is capable of a wide receiver 1 season, still left in the tank. Very interesting.
All right, so we have a couple other notes, but I'm throwing those away because I need to do some Calvin Ridley stuff with you, Kate, because I'm going to zag a little bit. I need you to explain this to me. Calvin Ridley on Dynasty League Football is going as wide receiver 18. He has
that's high.
He has 300 receiving yards over the last 2 seasons. In the big piece that he wrote this offseason, he said he was dealing with a foot injury that caused him so much pain that he couldn't walk. Meanwhile, one more thing on Calvin Ridley. He's going to
pile it on, man.
He's going to turn 29 this year, which isn't old, but it's probably clear that we've seen his peak. Meanwhile, we've got Christian Kirk, who was absolutely awesome last year with Jacksonville in his first year, going into year 2 with Trevor Lawrence, year 2 with the Jags, still going to play out of the slot, only 26 years old, 1,100 yards last year, going as wide receiver 37. How in the world can you justify the gap between those two players? I don't get it at all.
I don't think you can justify the gap. I'm not here. I have nothing to debate you here. for as much as I love Calvin Ridley and I believe in him for the 2023 season, like I'm fully bought in there. But yeah, the gap should not be as tremendous. If anything, I think, like having Calvin Ridley there is, helpful in terms of the efficiency aspect for Christian Kirk. Wasn't always the most efficient receiver last year, though he saw the volume. I think the threat of Calvin Ridley alone can open things up a lot more for Christian Kirk and might be able to create some room for yards after the catch potential. And
true or false, Kate? Who has more 900-yard receiving seasons? Let me report this. True or false? Christian Kirk has more 900-yard receiving seasons than Calvin Ridley.
I'm going to guess it's true.
It is absolutely true. One player is healthy. One player is 3 years younger. One player's already been in this system. And
I agree.
I'm just saying. I'm just emphasizing how much I disagree with the gap between those two players.
The gap is pretty wild, right? Yeah. But in terms of just what like upside each has in terms of like efficiency,
I just would not bet on Calvin Ridley having more points this year than Christian Kirk. Oh, that was a really bad pun. Never mind. Let's forget that.
Marcus, you're done.
That's
Turn this man's microphone off.
Yeah,
he's done for the day. No, wide receiver 18 for Calvin Ridley, who's going to be 29. It's really high. Like he's being drafted directly behind Devontae Adams, which is absurd to me. Like it's extremely high. But like when you look at the players behind him, excluding Christian Kirk, like you kind of get it, right? Like DJ Moore, Christian Watson, plenty of range of outcomes there. Like Michael Pittman, Quentin Johnston, like there are all question marks there, as well as Calvin Ridley. We've seen Calvin Ridley do it before. Again, I would not be at all surprised if we saw a top 12 performance out of Calvin Ridley. But yeah, the ADP gap is bonkers. Yeah. So yeah, get yourself some of the value there.
Absolutely. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every day. Again, every dayers, Kate and I will be back on Monday, getting you ready for the first week of the preseason. I cannot wait. It's going to be so much fun. We are free and available on all platforms. Go check out our show on YouTube as well. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. And we'll see you guys right back here on Monday. Bye, everybody.